It begins with a rumour, carried on desert wind, of a man who laid hands upon the horizon and felt it yield. They say he measured time by shadows of stone, and when he was done, the sun itself glanced off his work and learned a new way to rise. They say no one remembers his childhood, and everyone remembers his silence. They say he built not a tomb, but a road to a sky that had grown tired of being far away. He is not yet a name. He is a pair of steady hands and a gaze that lifts and hovers, as if he can see the weight of things before touching them. He walks to the edge of the plateau at Saqqara, while the day is still cool, his sandals tracking fine lines in dust the colour of bone. Below him, Memphis wakes in the murmuring way of cities that believe themselves immortal. To the west lies the desert that keeps no promises, to the east lies the river that offers too many. Between the two, he stands and compares. A boy follows at a cautious distance, trying to match the length of the man's stride. This boy will one day be known as his draftsman, his keeper of measures, his impatient mirror. Today he is only a voice. "Master," the boy says, and presses a clay tablet to his chest so it won't fall. The builders ask what to tell their wives. How long will this work take? The man looks at the horizon, which has learned to be sparing in its replies. "Tell them," he says, "to expect a new habit of dawn. Tell them their sons will know the shape of our patience." He is not yet a legend. He's only a problem that has volunteered to solve itself. He kneels to draw in sand with his finger. Not a sketch, not a map, something more like a prediction made visible. A square becomes a step, becomes a slope, then returns to a square. He does this again and again until the boy understands something is being argued out between the hand and the ground. Lines bloom and vanish under a light breeze. The man seems unbothered by the erasures, as if memory's only true enemy is certainty. He says, "We build with the confidence of failures." The boy frowns. "We build to avoid them." He shakes his head. "We build to test which stones are honest." The city below sends a procession of officials in fine linen that shines like river light. They bring words that are already heavy, wrapped in caution. At their head is a priest of the sun, his scalp gleaming and eyes softened by secrets. There is talk of a king who is not quite a man and not quite a god, whose boundaries must be tended like a sacred garden. There is talk of his life travelling the long arc from horizon to horizon, and the need to shape a resting place that is as much command as it is surrender. "You will advise," the priest says. "You will guide. You will lay out the proportions that keep things from falling into wrong conversations with time." He pauses, one hand slightly lifted, as if to catch a statement that might otherwise run away. "You will not," and here the priest's voice becomes polite and careful, "you will not be seen trying to outlast him." The man nods, and the priest relaxes. But later, alone, the man writes on a shard of pottery. To honour the king is to honour the geometry of heaven. To outlast him is to obey the stones. He is known to some as physician, to others as scribe, to the careful few as the one who knows what can be asked of limestone without making it lie. Names collect around him like bees that have mistaken him for a flowering tree. But when he is alone, he moves among his tools as a composer among flutes, and each instrument answers without complaint. He begins with the ground, not just where it bears weight, but where it whispers. He listens for the hollow places. He marks what the wind carries and what it returns. In the city, the king is Djoser, and he is the horizon made into a person. Out here on the plateau there is only the world and what can be persuaded from it. A line is traced to the north, another to the east, so that one day both may kneel to the cardinal directions. It is not rebellion to align a tomb with the sky. It is obedience in a language without vowels. Workers arrive in the hundreds, then the thousands. They are given bread and beer and the kind of pay that convinces their doubts to keep quiet in daylight. They bring with them stories from villages with names that dissolve in river air. The children of fisherfolk mingle with the sons of quarrymen, and they learn a new grammar of labour together. The first stones brought to the site are modest sandstone's nervous cousins, chalky and uncertain. But then the white limestone arrives from Tura. pale as rumour and slick where the chisel bites. The foremen argue over how to lift what will not be carried, how to set down what refuses to be placed. The man listens. He finds rhythms in their frustrations. He introduces a ramp like a long thought that refuses to end. He binds bundles of reeds in tight cylinders and shows how they can cradle stone and roll it forward without complaint. He suggests wetting sand to make it flow like polite water under a sled. The boy watches. He learns that miracles often arrive dressed as technique. The first plan is a flat tomb, squared and composed, a mastaba that sits like a seal on a document too sacred to read aloud. It is measured, cut, placed, finished. The walls are dressed with fine casing stone, a shell of light that makes noon seem a little embarrassed. The boy looks to the master, expectant, as if a sentence has ended and applause is due. The master says, "We have learned how the ground prefers to be touched." "Is it finished?" the boy asks. "It is ready to argue back," the master replies. He walks the perimeter in slow arcs. He listens to the wind and speaks its grammar to himself in murmurs. He stands with eyes closed, and a passer-by might think him at prayer. When he opens them again, he sees not the mastaba, but a problem wearing the clothes of a monument. He calls for stones again, and the city obliges. He thickens the shell, extends the plane, allows the tomb to admit it wants to rise as well as rest. It gains height, then steadiness. There's a new rumour, this one of a man who clears his throat and makes limestone pay attention. The work grows from horizontal to vertical to something that confuses the distinction. Steps appear, like the backbones of mountains, and between them lies the certainty that the sky too can be measured. On a night when the moon is thin as a breath, he sits with the boy and draws lines in the dust that only moonlight can bear witness to. "This," he says, "is how it refuses to collapse on itself. We layer inward, always leaning toward what will hold. The steps will be not just heights but agreements." The boy squints. "What will it agree with?" "Gravity," the master says, smiling, "and the vanity of kings." They add tiers as a poet adds stanzas, 4 steps, then 6. Each one finds its conversation with the one below. The masons learn to lay accretion layers at tilt, so the weight leans inward and does not plot an escape. The casings are set in gleaming white, so that the sun can find a partner to dance with after mid-morning. They align the faces to the cardinal points, because the king deserves witnesses he can trust. North, south, east, west. The complex spreads with courtyards and sham buildings that are stage sets for ritual, doors for spirits to walk through, passages for memory to rehearse its lines. The king visits. He arrives with a train that turns dust into ceremony. The priests stand at measured distances, careful not to cast shadows where none are permitted. Djoser ascends a small platform that has been built not for utility, but for understanding. He looks at the ascending places of stone, the grammar of ambition piled up in polite intervals. He is not a man who often feels the urge to smile, but a ghost of one passes over his mouth. "Will it last?" he asks the master. The master says, "Yes." It is a word without ornament. Beside it, the wind falls quiet. "How do you know?" the king asks, mildly curious, impatient for certainty. "Because it has chosen a shape that already existed," the master replies. "We only made visible what the earth remembered." He does not say he knows because he can feel its future in his bones. He does not say that when he closes his eyes he sees centuries blink and shrug, until only the constellations have the energy to remain impressed. As the work continues, below ground expands as boldly as above. Corridors riddle the earth like whispers. Chambers multiply in the dark, each with its assigned silence. Blue faience tiles glimmer where the torchlight stutters, making the underground seem like a pocket of night that learned to breathe. The masons descending return with stories of a palace under the world, with rooms meant for a king who will learn that immortality has a taste similar to solitude. Some say there are hundreds of rooms, that getting lost in them is considered a compliment the builders pay to the dead. The boy goes below at midday, when the surface is most sincere with heat. He runs his fingers along the tiles, the faint coolness telling him this is a world that prefers quiet company. He brings back questions. Why so many rooms? He asks the master. Why make a map that refuses to be memorized? In case the soul needs to get lost to find its way, the master says, in case the king enjoys a little difficulty after years of everything kneeling. He begins to think often of the line between honouring a man and flattering him. Stone is honest in a way courtiers are not. It outlasts grievances. It holds its shape longer than memory holds its accuracy. He writes on a shard. To be useful to a king is a kind of holiness. To be useful to the dead is to say yes to the sky with both hands. The labourers sing. They name their aches as if they were pets. They speak of home in the same voice they use for bread. At dusk the plateau glows like a table set with unasked questions. The master walks through the tents, keeps track of complaints that need remedies, and complaints that need to be left alone until they decide to resolve themselves. He asks for better ropes, stronger sleds, more water carried up in jars that don't lie about their contents. He asks for patience as if ordering a new shipment of stone. He receives it in small, grudging instalments that arrive dressed as jokes. There is a day when a block slips, and the sound it makes is both final and full of apology. A worker's leg becomes a story that begins with, "He used to." The master kneels beside the man, whose eyes aren't ready to understand the rest of his body. The master speaks to him not of glory or reward, but of an old song, how it runs up and down the scale of work and offers a kind of forgiveness that is not a bargain. He arranges a place for him in the shade, where he will tell stories and keep the cellars of morale stocked. The boy watches and learns architecture is also triage. That night, a wind comes with the smell of the river tangled in it. The master dreams he is inside the future looking back. In this dream, his name has grown to fill spaces no names should be asked to fill. It wears jewellery of legend too heavy even for stories. He wakes before dawn and goes to the top of the highest finished step. He watches the east assemble itself from whispers. "Not me," he says to the morning, "not even the king, only the line we made between ground and sky." He decides something then that will seem minor to everyone else. The angle of outward slopes must be guarded from eagerness. The casing must be patient. Ambition must be told it cannot skip lessons. He orders rehearsal walls built at the periphery. He orders failures invited in and seated politely. Better to learn exactly where stone gets embarrassed than to pretend it never does. A priest approaches at midday, eyebrows made for disapproval. There are rumours, the priest says, that what is being built is not a tomb but a throne, that it presumes upon the sun, that it treats the horizon as a servant. He waits as if these rumours might be coaxed into falling silent. The master speaks in the voice of water. It is a staircase for memory, he says, not for the king to climb, but for the world to remember how height feels when asked to be faithful. The priest considers this, then shakes out his linen robe to dislodge metaphors. There is a ceremony, he says, the Hebsed. The king will run, and the years will run with him. The complex must honour the course. The walls must be so high that age bumps its head and forgets its arguments. The master nods. He shows him a plan. A long court to the south, colonnades like harps that play silence, dummy chapels that allow the spirit to practice authority away from the gossip of the living. The priest sighs as if the problem had been hoping to be more interesting. Then he goes away to rehearse gratitude. There is a craftsman named Mary who teaches stone to behave as if it were wood. He carves columns that wear papyrus capitals as if fresh from the river. He whispers to the master, "I prefer making stone pretend. It makes it humble." The master laughs softly. "It makes it truthful," he says, "because the world it imitates is what taught us the gesture in the first place." When the fourth step is finished, a delegation arrives from a distance where language tastes slightly different in the mouth. They bring gifts, and among them is a device, a set of weights and a plumb line that insists on honesty because it would be insulted by anything else. The master takes it in his hands and feels how it loves verticality. He thanks them. He introduces the device to the blocks as if presenting two friends who are always meant to meet. The boy grows into a young man, and his stride both lengthens and learns manners. He leaves childish impatience in the places where shade holds it together. He begins to suggest things, and has the experience to be right often enough that it does not embarrass him. He argues for a broader base before the next step is added. He outlines a method for tracking each layer's inclination, so that no surprise can pretend it was invited. The master listens, the way a river listens, a surface with light on it, movement below. "You are learning to hear it," the master says. "Hear what?" the young man asks. "The shape," he replies, "the way it insists on being discovered." A rumour returns to the city like a migrating bird that forgot winter. This one says the builders have made a place underground so elaborate the king could live there while still breathing. The rumour says the complex above is a decoy to distract the jealous gods. The rumour says the master will be buried in the king's shadow, and the shadow will learn a new habit of attachment. Rumours, like certain plants, thrive on neglect and partial sunlight. The master lets them grow where they do no harm and pulls them up, where they begin to choke the footpaths of reason. He accepts a new title. It is a collection of syllables that mean, "The king trusts the way you ask questions." The priests smile like cats near saucers. The officials nod because nodding is a way to stay employed. The masons shrug and continue making verticalness honest. The master stores the title under his bed, in the dark, where it will not make a spectacle of itself. There is a day when a messenger brings news that the quarry has yielded a seam of stone that behaves with the intelligence of a good horse. It takes a cut without flinching, takes a polish without sulking, takes its place without whispering to its neighbours. The master orders extra offerings to be laid at the altar of coincidence. He believes in skill and labour and planning as the main gods of any sensible city, but he also believes in gratitude when the world gives you an easier day. The king returns. He comes quietly, without the usual dust-consuming procession. He walks with the master under the colonnade that leads nowhere except to a better understanding of distance. His hand glides along the stone that has learned to pretend it grew here. He pauses before one of the dummy chapels, where the doors do not open because opening is not the point. He inhales the dry, thoughtful air. "What do you see when you look at it?" he asks the master. "Intervals," the master says. "Weights arranged to outlast their confusion. A conversation with the sky that will not be embarrassed if it is overheard." Djoser glances at him sideways, amused. "And you? What will you be in that conversation?" The master considers, then says, "Punctuation." The king laughs, not because it is funny, but because it is true in a way that always improves the breath. "When my breath fails," he says, not dramatically, just placing truth where it belongs, "will this place do what we ask of it?" "It will," the master says. "It will remind the living how to stand in the presence of what cannot be negotiated." They walk on. Above them, the sun lifts itself the rest of the way up, as if to see better what is being claimed in its name. The final casing stones are placed. They gleam like a sermon delivered in silence. The steps are 6 each one, are packed with the one before, each one a sentence completing a paragraph in a language no longer spoken above the ground. The accretion layers lean inward like counsellors who have learned that closeness is a way to argue less. The footprint ends up larger than it first wanted to be, because desire taught modesty a better way to stand. The boy-turned man runs his plumb line along the face, and smiles the fierce private smile of a craftsman who knows he has not been wasting his brief life. The master stands at the perimeter, looking at the whole. He feels for the first time a small fear. It is the fear of having been correct. It means responsibility has chosen him as a place to sleep. In the underground chambers, the last of the tiles are set with careful fingers that won't be remembered by name. The corridors breathe faintly, as if they have learned what lungs are for. The offering tables are placed where they can both be found and be allowed to do their work without performance. The architect, he will not yet accept the word, is offered a chance to carve his name somewhere safe. He refuses, not out of humility, but out of fidelity to the story he believes the stone is telling. Names are vessels, he thinks. They are meant to hold only as much as can be carried without spillage. The rest belongs to the work. A storm comes, not a desert storm that burns itself out in sand and sulk, but a sky weeping from the river that crosses the plateau with the authority of a cancelled appointment. The workers shelter. The master goes out into the rain. He places his palm against the casing stones and feels the run of water find the small inevitable imperfections and make them gleam. He laughs aloud, softly, because imperfection is proof the thing is not a lie. He speaks to the 6 steps the way a father might to a son who has begun to grow taller than him. Listen, he says, there will be years when no one speaks your name. There will be years when some will. There will be years when someone will pretend to know you and get it partly right, which is all anyone ever manages. In those years and the others, be what you promised, a vertical honesty. A reminder that height is not a boast, but a duty. When the rain ends, the plateau smells of old arguments resolved. The priests prepare the rituals. The Hebsed court is swept of unsanctioned footprints. The banners are hung so they can flutter in a way that suggests deference. The king runs the course as tradition requires, turning age into a pantomime of defeat. He completes the circuit, and the priests announce a renewal as if they had invented the calendar. The people cheer because cheering in the presence of power is the oldest way to stay together. In the far edge of the complex stands a colonnaded passage that looks like reeds turned to stone, which is exactly the point. The master brings the young man there and traces with his finger the lines that suggest growth. He does not say the word immortality, he says attention. The king dies, not dramatically, not reluctantly, but in the way kings do when they have grown tired of being expected to regenerate. The city dresses itself accordingly. The officials become professional mourners overnight. The priests add a new note to their voices that both elevates and soothes. The master walks the complex alone, greeting the angles and adjacencies as if they were old friends told a sad story. The burial is a choreography of reverence. The underground opens its mouth to receive what has been expected all along. The corridor's cool breath once again approves of everything that happens slowly. The sarcophagus accepts its role. The offerings take their places like well-trained actors who know the difference between sincerity and exaggeration. The priests sing the words that laminate the soul against the mischief of oblivion. The master stands outside the chamber until the last word settles, then he walks back toward the light. After, the complex does what monuments do when the living go home. It returns to its conversation with the sky. Days pass and become the kind of story time tells itself to remember it keeps going. Pilgrims arrive. Officials count and pretend counting is sacred. Children point and their mothers correct them, and both actions are the same kind of devotion. The master's name spreads where names and bread share the same plate. Some call him the king's doctor who taught illness to fear its own manners. Some call him high priest of the sun, who learned the sunrise by heart. Some call him the architect, the first to ask stone to explain itself in public. He accepts none of these in full, and refuses none of them entirely. He goes about the city in old sandals with new thoughts, and sometimes he watches the river and lets it imagine it is instructing him. An official comes with a commission. Another, he says, with a smile that hopes to be mistaken for humility. For the next in line. A true pyramid, perhaps. A smooth-sided boast. A reply to what you have already said. The master doesn't answer right away. He looks to the west where the desert keeps its empty promises. He thinks of the steps, how they are honest, visible increments of ambition. He imagines a smooth slope, how it would lie to the eye by hiding the intervals, turning effort into inevitability. He wonders which is kinder, a beauty that shows its work, or one that pretends not to have needed any. He says, yes. It is a word built of future dust. He will not live to see what others will do with it. But he senses a direction, and directions are what minds live on. In private he writes on a shard. The first is a question. Everything after is an answer in the form of an argument. Years fold. He grows older in the manner of men who forget to count their reflections. He instructs, he corrects, he permits. He aches where he used to bend without complaint. He sits more often, but when he stands, gravity remembers to be polite. The young man becomes someone who is asked what to do and says it without apology. He returns to the underground room sometimes alone to listen. He never hears words. He hears the tone of finished things. One night, after the moon has told the plateau it will be late, he dreams again of the future. This time he sees his own name wearing a different shape. He sees a temple raised in his honor by people who will have forgotten the exact shape of his hands, but remember the direction of his gaze. He sees scholars argue and priests reframe and builders imitate. He wakes, not frightened, not pleased, only aware that work, once finished, continues without asking permission. He goes to the pyramid at dawn. He places his palms against the casing, now weathered slightly, made more honest by air and time. He whispers, "Learn to be misunderstood. All honest things must." He dies as good men do who have removed their vanity in layers until the last is easily set aside. Not in a chamber decorated for the purpose, not in the arms of a legend, in bed, at home, with the sun indifferent but present. The city notices and puts on its small theatre of grief. There is talk of where he should be laid, near the king, in his own new chamber. The debate becomes part of his legacy, which he would find amusing. In the end, the earth accepts him in a place that allows people to misunderstand him comfortably and admire him correctly. The years confide in one another and forget. Sand does its slow, competent work. The casings dull, then soften, then dream of their original brightness the way old men dream of running. The steps remain, an honesty that no fashion can quite afford to refill with pretension. On the day the last person who knew him by his walking stride dies, a young mason is born who will carve a stone so well it will make a priest cry. That is how time keeps its debts paid. Travellers from the north, centuries later, stand on the plateau and point. They call it the first. They are mostly right. They carry away drawings made with charcoal and frowns. They pronounce old names as if they were new wine. Djoser, Imhotep. Some say the architect's tomb was never found. Some say it was found and mistaken for something less proud. Some say the architect never died, that he stepped into the geometry and became a quiet angle. People will say anything if the light is good. Stories are told in the markets of Memphis, which has found ways to keep existing under different introductions. Children volunteer to be the great man for a minute. They hold reeds and give orders to imaginary labourers. They call to each other across the dust, lean it inward, mind the ramp, wet the sand. And their parents smile, because pretending to give commands is a healthy way to practice being obedient to what is larger than you. A scribe records the festivals, the sacrifices, the seasonal offerings. In a margin, he writes a thing not required. The first pyramid was not a building. It was a decision to make height into a law. There is a drought and then a flood because the river prefers a dramatic personality. Trade thins, then recovers. Dynasties change clothes and teach their names new intonations. The pyramid remains what it always was, a spine for the landscape, a measure for the ambition of funerals, a reminder to anyone who looks up from their bread that humans are capable of making the sky reconsider its distance. Then the day comes, always inevitably, always surprisingly, when someone asks a question no one thought to ask in a century. Why steps? And the answer arrives like a friend who has been politely waiting to be noticed. Because the first honest thing had to show its work. The story turns, as stories must, toward the person who began it. He is a young man again, in memory's useful way, and he is standing at the edge of the plateau with his boy. The lines in the sand do not last long, but they do not need to. He tells the boy a joke, and the boy laughs, and the wind takes the sound and carries it a little. Then the ground eats it, because the ground is hungry in the mornings. "What is a pyramid?" the boy asks, perhaps for the first time, perhaps for the last. It doesn't matter. It is a good question. A way to teach stone to become time, the master says. The boy frowns, then smiles because he does not understand and knows he will someday. What is a step, he asks, more confident now. An admission, the master says, that we cannot jump there, but we intend to arrive. At noon, when sun makes even thoughts sweat, the masons pause and drink and pretend they are kings for a moment. Behind the colonnades, shadows perform their patient magic of turning stone back into idea. In the underground, coolness maintains its stubborn republic. No one sees the master lay his hand against the north face and close his eyes. No one hears what he says, because he does not say it aloud. He makes a vow to the shape, and the shape does not promise anything in return, because it is busy being true. In the years that become centuries, the smooth-sided pyramids arrive. They gleam absurdly. They make the sun flirt. They pretend they were always inevitable. People love them, because people love the near impossible more than the honestly difficult. But even as they take their place, the first remains the necessary opening chord. Without it, the harmony that follows would be noise pretending to be music. Pilgrims return again and again to Saqqara. Some come to weep, some to measure, some to stand in the presence of something that will not flatter them and feel a relief they did not know they needed. A girl with clever hands traces a line and decides to be a mason. A boy who talks too much falls quiet and learns to listen to distances. A priest forgets a prayer and invents a better one. An old woman eats a piece of bread and decides it is the best meal of her life because the wind has sand in it, and the sand is part of the recipe of being here. The river keeps up its gossip. The desert keeps up its boundaries. The city keeps up its habit of imagining itself permanent. The pyramid keeps up its responsibility, which is to say, teaching the horizon that humans can be slender and tall in the right places. If one were to take a chisel to the air and cut away all that is not necessary, one would find the following. A square made obedient to the north and east, a series of rising admissions, a gleaming shell now content to be a little honest about weather, a court where age was outrun ceremonially. Corridors below that are a polite complexity, and a man whose name the world will seize upon and carry to places he never walked, turning him into a lesson he may not have intended, but will not be ashamed of. He is remembered in stones wearing certain shadows. He is honoured in the alignment of faces with stars. He is invoked by those who ask materials to grow up and behave. He is misunderstood by anyone who has never tried to stack patience 6 times and make it look inevitable. He is immortal in the exact, regrettable, wonderful way all useful men are, through the persistence of the thing they convinced the world to accept. The boy, now old, returns to the plateau one last time. He brings his grandson, who asks questions with the ferocity of someone who has not yet learned what fear feels like in the bones. He tells him the story. He leaves out the parts that belong to silence. He uses his hands because there are things words get embarrassed about saying alone. Was he the first? The grandson asks, because this is the title of the tale, and titles are promises. Yes, the old man says, because someone had to be brave enough to make height a law. After him, others remembered how to obey it with grace. The child nods, satisfied. He races along the edge of the court, feet ensuring that dust will continue to be what it has always been. The old man watches him. He does not pray. He trusts the air. As evening takes up its work, the plateau reddens in a way that suggests the sun is signing its name. The pyramid stands in its precise arrogance. Birds write small improvisations around its edges. The city below has forgotten some of its older hymns and invented new ones that rhyme without meaning to. Somewhere, in a storage room, a scribe finds a shard with a line on it and reads, "The first is a question." He smiles because answers have kept him fed. He places the shard back where it can continue speaking to the dark without interruption. Far to the north, the stranger stares at a copy of a drawing and decides to travel. Far to the south, a child stacks lumps of clay and calls the 6th one important. Far to the east, a king dreams of a mountain he can own. Far to the west, the desert yawns politely. Night arrives. It places a hand on the plateau and strokes it the way mothers soothe feverish children. Stars refuse to admit they care, but they lean a little closer out of habit. The pyramid considers their silence and matches it. In that silence is the voice of the man who stood here first, and the boy who asked him good questions, and the king who required an answer death would take seriously, and the masons whose palms grew calluses that looked like maps, and the priests whose words surely helped, and the labourers who invented brave ways to keep going. In that silence is the measure of an admission turned into a law, that humans die, and hope is tall. At dawn, for the 10,000th time, the sun checks its reflection in the limestone. The stone does what it has learned to do, accept light, and give it back in a way that reminds the light to be grateful. You ask, who built the first pyramid? Here is the honest answer: a man who taught stone to become time, and everyone who decided to believe him long enough to lift. And here is the answer the boy would have preferred: the one who made the sky come closer, 6 honest steps at a time.